We need the people in Whitehaven and Millham areas and into the West Lakes to stay indoors and shelter until further notice.
It's just a mad afternoon. It didn't strike me as the sort of person that would do something like that. I didn't even know he had guns.
As I just glanced over, I saw this man with this huge gun on his lap.
Where the car had been obscuring this body, this woman that had fallen over. She was lying perpendicular across the pavement, straight down it, and 2 bags of shopping and a handbag on the floor. And I still didn't connect it, and I shouted, are you okay? But she didn't move, she didn't say anything. And about a minute later, she just stopped breathing. And we were holding her, she just died.
Clay pigeon shooting is an age-old tradition of our British heritage. Whilst often conjuring thoughts of the English elite, little is known by the greater public of just how one would get involved in the sport short of possessing a Lord's title. In this respect, it's unsurprising that even less is known about how exactly shotguns are legally obtained. Amongst the copious amounts of paperwork and police checks, safety is of the utmost importance. But no matter how safe this process is, mothers like Lucy Cope are still having to bury loved ones when these weapons fall into the wrong hands.
The pain that I felt in July 2002 is still here today, as raw as ever. It scared me. It was like I was in another world, and it was a bad dream. And I felt strange. At 5 minutes past 6, I felt my whole body just shake, and I was so weak, and I just knew that Damon had gone. I felt him leave. I felt it was really, really weird. And when the nurse came back up for the final time at 10 minutes past 6, her face wasn't the same, and her exact words was, "I am so sorry that Damon had passed away some 9 minutes before."
Damien was shot dead following a dispute with a gang member. He was rushed to hospital where he died as a result of 180 bullet wounds made from just one single homemade cartridge. Since his death, Mrs. Cope has established Mothers Against Guns and now campaigns for a total ban on ownership.
I campaign for I'm still trying to get a total ban the sale and the make of all firearms into the UK, and I'm also trying to now ban anybody with a licence for a firearm. No, I'm sorry. We have to do something. We have to clean up our own back garden, because weapons of mass destruction are here on our streets. We need to clean up our own country first.
Do you feel anyone should own a shotgun for a legitimate reason, such as farmers?
When it comes to farmers, yes, they have to protect the livestock, but we've got technology in this century to protect their stock. They don't need to have firearms.
Whilst the anti-gun lobbies will maintain that there are no good reasons for anyone to hold a gun, it's generally accepted in the farming community that the use of a shotgun is the only surefire way to keep their pests under control and their crops safe. I hopped on a train to visit the Midlands director of the National Farmers Union, Richard Hezlet, and asked him exactly what would happen if legitimate ownership was taken away.
It would be pretty disastrous for farming, and again, probably what would happen, you'd export farming abroad to people who can control their pests, so you don't actually achieve anything other than just pushing your agriculture abroad. I mean, the shotguns and rifles, for that matter, for predators, are an important part of protecting your crops and stock. I think everybody accepts a certain percentage of losses, but ultimately, if you don't do anything, you lose your crop, and that's not very good farming. If you're not able to look after your crop as you would like to do so, you're going to go out of business, and ultimately you'll either import it or prices will go up for the public.
With that said, would it be correct to jeopardise the safety of Britain so that the farming minority can protect their crops by way of a buckshot? As you saw earlier, the effect that one man had on Cumbria was devastating. Derrick Bird legally held the shotgun he used to kill 13 people, and it's argued that if these laws were tighter, it never would have happened.
It's very difficult to know what might have prevented Derrick Bird from committing his awful crimes. I think that what we can say is that he wasn't a member of a gun club, and he wasn't a farmer. So it wasn't very clear why he needed his guns. So you could extrapolate from that and say Cumbria could have been prevented, the tragedy there could have been prevented by a tighter licensing system. Nobody will ever know.
There have been countless calls for reform, including tighter regulations, more counter-signatories on the application, and most anti-gun campaigners support a complete ban. But even they think that this extreme is unlikely to happen.
Well, my preference would be for a complete ban on firearms in the UK, but I recognise that that is highly unlikely in the foreseeable future. In a sense, it's a little bit of a red herring to emphasise the potential ban on firearms, because that's just not going to happen. But what I do think we could legitimately call for and see some progress on is greater restrictions on people's access to firearms without a complete ban being actually implemented.
So what sort of things are you proposing to change?
So what I'm calling for now is much greater safeguards that would see a ban on people being able to store firearms in their own home. It would also include a public register being made available of everybody who has a firearms certificate, and for an annual medical fitness test to determine somebody's suitability to hold a firearms certificate. If those three measures were put in place, I think it would provide a much greater level of protection for the public and would be more likely to, I think, prevent some of the atrocities that we've seen in places like Cumbria and Dunblane and Hungerford.
It's easy to think that the licensing process is nowhere near strong enough when people like Derrick Byrne are deemed capable of owning a shotgun. But the extent that the police go to in a bid to weed out criminals and the mentally unfit is more than just stamping ink onto a piece of paper. Many licence holders, such as Nigel Burridge, think that the checks they undergo are just about right.
The application procedure was extremely strict, wanting all the reasonable security measures for the security of the gun, inspecting them, obviously checking my history. Right back to my earliest years. I found it quite a thorough procedure. I had a couple of minor problems where, young and stupid, we all done something foolish in our younger days. These effectively came up, and I was rapped on the knuckles for failing to declare it. So it proves that the system of investigation into your history works very well. An inspector was sent round to my property to actually check the security of the box on the wall, as well as secure a place for the ammunition. All aspects of the security of where the gun was kept. It was very thorough.
As thorough as the application may be, the police agree that there is a need for reform and want to make shotguns just as difficult to obtain as Section 1 firearms. These guns are considered more dangerous and as such come under much stricter control.
In relation to the Section 1 and shotgun certificates, I've recommended that they be brought into line, that it's a single certificate, and that the majority of additional controls in relation to Section 1 firearms are applied to shotguns. I think it brings a discipline into the world of shotgun certificate that would, aid certainly the public perception around the reassurance it offered. So
with both the anti-gun lobby and the police calling for a reform, it seems that the change will eventually happen. Whilst the tighter system would not directly affect farming or the sport, it will lead to tougher checks and probably higher safety. If these steps can prevent another Derrick Byrd from obtaining a gun, then as far as this shooter is concerned, that is all that matters.
Was that one? Kids with guns. Kids with guns.